get to the end of the decade and you're a movie maniac like me, well, it's time to look back at what the past decade has brought us in terms of really great cinema. Somehow, I've narrowed it down to a list of 10 that I feel right now are the 10 that I want to showcase to you watching this now as my favorites of the entire decade. Now, I've seen just over 800 feature films released in this past decade. I've still got plenty that I want to check off my list before I can call it anything like definitive, but at the end of the decade here, crossing into a new one, I'm just going to fill you in on what I feel are the 10 that are at the top right now. I'll just present the 10 alphabetically and give you a bit of a sense on how much I love them and why I think I love them and why I think you might love them if you gave them a chance. So let's start with the first, Another Year. It's written and directed by UK filmmaker Mike Leigh. His movies are full of people who you really feel could exist in real life, which is not to say that the movies and the stories themselves come across like documentaries. It's not quite documentary, but it's not your average kind of Hollywood story or the way that Hollywood would craft a story about realistic people. It's done in a way that I think is very much a British kind of style, and yet Mike Leigh and his stories and his characters really do stand apart quite a lot from your typical kind of crowd-pleasing UK hits. I mean, for all the acclaim that Mike Leigh has enjoyed over the years from film critics and his big fans and film festivals, he's never been among the big box office names in terms of even UK filmmakers. But he certainly has a solid fan base of people, including myself, who really connect with the way that he sees people and the attention that he gives to people who, in some ways, like the character played by Leslie Manville in this film, people who are perhaps good-hearted and well-intentioned, but are really kind of messed up in the way that they try to, and really struggle to and fail to, mostly, get their lives together and generate their own happiness. If you like human dramas, you will really love this film. And if you've never seen a film by Mike Leigh before, maybe this will be the one to really get your attention. I have to say that this is one of the films on this list. There's about half of them, I'd say 5 of the 10, that has really grown on me over the years. The more I watch it, the more I love it and the more I appreciate it. The first time I saw it on a big screen, I kind of thought it was... I erred on the side of caution by saying, yeah, it's a solid Mike Leigh movie and I'm a fan already, so I'll give it an 8 out of 10. But I wasn't entirely convinced coming out of the cinema that it was one of his best works. Now I really do think it is, and I love this film to pieces. It's really sad in a lot of ways, so you've got to be prepared for something that, that's kind of pretty tough to take emotionally. But I think it's a really wonderful film, and I hope you seek it out and I hope you love it as much as I do. It's called Another Year. Now, on to number 2, Black Swan. It's from the same calendar year, 2010. Now, Black Swan, I think pretty much from the time that it premiered, I guess, in competition at the Venice Film Festival, it has received mostly very positive reaction from, I think, film critics, and it was, you'd have to say it was a sleeper hit at the box office. But I know that the opinion on Black Swan is quite divided. Let's just say that those who really don't like it and don't connect with it and aren't impressed by it and aren't enthused about it at all really, really feel strongly that way. And I think the same would be true of those who really love it and who really think it's really impressive and enjoyable in a really kind of dark, twisted, even kind of sick, weird kind of way. Look, I think Darren Aronofsky is a really crazily passionate filmmaker, and even when he makes films that I flat out don't like, Noah would be one of those, you can still see that there's a filmmaker really, I guess, swinging for the fences. Someone who's really not being cautious or holding themselves back or unafraid of looking ridiculous. And it's interesting to note the reactions that actors like not just Barbara Hershey in this film, but also Mickey Rourke, obviously playing the title role in The Wrestler. Mickey Rourke sort of mentioned a couple of times in awards acceptance speeches that Darren Aronofsky will break you down, man, if you decide to work with him. And I believe Barbara Hershey has told the press, if you want to have an easy time on a film set, don't work with Darren Aronofsky. Maybe you can take that as a compliment of the guy, because he definitely pushes his actors and his crew and his own imagination right out to the edges of normalcy, I think, And for an absolutely weird film, as much as Black Swan is, it really was quite a big hit. So I think that shows, maybe that just shows there are a lot of weird people out there in the world like me who really get into a really intense, kind of dark, twisted story in which like anything, everything and nothing might be real or a hallucination. I know there are very smart people who I know who thought this film was just pretty much trash, and I'm prepared to accept that opinion, because it's your opinion, you're welcome to it obviously, but I'm prepared to accept that it might be a trash movie, but I think if it is, it's one of the best trash movies I've ever seen. As good a trash movie as I could ever hope to see, I think. I love Black Swan. Admittedly, it's been a while since I've watched it, so who knows, maybe I've changed enough in the interim that it might fall right off my list the next time I give it a go. Hopefully not. But until that happens, Black Swan is in my top 10 of movies from this decade. Now, the next one is the only one of these films that I have yet to watch for a second time. It's called Ex Libris, the New York Public Library. Now, you probably haven't heard of this film. It's a documentary that runs for about the same length as Titanic, actually a bit longer, even 10 minutes longer than Titanic. And it really is just a mosaic of footage done in a very observational style without hardly anything in the way of sort of editorial comment, or certainly any overt comment. There's absolutely no narration. There are no direct interviews with talking heads. There's no explanatory text on the screen. There's not even anything to identify on screen who's talking, unless someone who's actually in the frame and on the soundtrack is already doing it, is already introducing the person like in the moment. So it's an observational documentary, and it really is observing all the different kinds of people who use all the many boroughs of the public library in New York. The back of the box says that there are 92 locations throughout Manhattan, the Bronx and Staten Island, encompassing the network of the library system in New York. And I was just, as the movie went on and on and on, I just got so caught up in the range of human behavior and human endeavors and human artistry and the philosophy that some of the people were speaking out loud in kind of speaking engagements. There are board meetings and committee meetings where like just the whole process of keeping something as huge as a public library going is discussed in detail. I understand if it sounds incredibly boring in theory, and why would anyone want to watch a movie like that? Why would anybody want to make a movie like that? Hey, look, I had my doubts going into this, but I knew that it was from a documentarian who's very well respected and who I'd seen a previous film of his that I quite liked called National Gallery. I think this is better than National Gallery. It's about as long as National Gallery. I think because it's a library system rather than, I can relate more to the things that go on in the New York Library than I can in an art gallery. So, I just found myself really moved and overawed by just everything that was being captured in this film, and just like what it was saying about humanity and about what we're capable of. It just really kind of took me by surprise, blew me away. I haven't rewatched it yet because I've got it on loan from I've got it on loan, ironically, from the South Australian library system right now as we speak. I am going to watch it again before I return it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I enjoy it as much as I did the first time, but we'll wait and see. In the meantime, I really wanted to get the word out about this film because I loved it so much while watching it, and it took me so much by surprise. Maybe you'll love it too. It's called Ex Libris, the New York Public Library, and it's directed by Frederick Weissman. On to number 4. A controversial choice, I'm sure, because, hey, not everyone loves Les Miserables, not everyone loves musicals, and certainly even there are Les Miserables fans who aren't fans of the movie, you know, for all sorts of reasons, Russell Crowe probably being at the top of the list. I'll just say it, I didn't have a problem at all with Russell Crowe. I think he acts his role in this film really fine. I think he sings it fine. I don't have a problem with Russell Crowe. There, I said it. Because the musical is pretty much my favorite stage musical of all time, it was really going to have to like go out of its way to you know, muck the experience up for me. And that it did not do. It gets so much so right so often that I can forgive the things that it does less well, or the things about it that are a bit questionable, like, you know, some of Tom Hooper's weird Dutch angles are maybe, you know, a bit sort of puzzling and gratuitous at times, it could be said. But I don't dislike the live singing on the whole. I don't dislike the handheld camera. Some of the, you know, cutting short of the numbers, you know, maybe you could quibble over, but you know what? When I love the musical so much and it brings so much of its quality to the screen in this movie version, then it just has to be on my list. There's probably, you know, not much more detail I could go into. It's Les Mis. Most people are familiar with it. If you wanted to see it, I'm sure you've seen it already, probably multiple times. So I'll just say that Les Miserables, the movie musical, had to be on my list, so there it is. Life of Pi. Life of Pi would be another one like, in fact, Les Miserables and like Another Year, a film that really did grow even better for me the more I watched it. I saw it twice in a cinema, the first time in 3D, the second time just in 2D. It showed that the story and the basic filmmaking and the imagination of it and the emotion of it were all so, you know, so strong and satisfying to me that honestly, the 3D did enhance the film, but the film didn't need it to be amazing. And again, this is a very well-known film, you know, maybe a little bit less well-known than your typical sort of blockbuster, but it made, I think it surprised everyone with just how much money it made, not so much in the US, it did well in the US, but around the world, it generated a huge amount of money given the expectations for it, and given that it's based on a novel and it's not, you know, your typical special effects film, it's not your typical 3D film, it's certainly not like a comic book kind of crowd pleasing kind of film. And really it's a film where for most of the time only one human is present in the frame, you know, pushing the whole story forward. He has the most amazing visual effects and colourful filmmaking around him, but it's pretty radical really to have one person carrying a film to the degree that this film does. You know, you could compare it with Disney's The Jungle Book, with just live action Mowgli and all the animals around him. But I enjoyed this film, Life of Pi, much more than I did Disney's recent Jungle Book film. I just think it's just an exhilarating adventure, as well as a fascinating kind of philosophical kind of story. It's a incredible tale of survival, and it's like you wonder how much imagination is really being applied in terms of the hero recounting his adventures, or, you know, how much of it is just a story or how much of it really happened. It's just an amazingly different kind of imaginative, like large canvas epic special effects film, and I love it in so many ways. And yeah, can't wait to watch it again. It's been a little while since I put it on, but I look very much forward to putting it on again. Life of Pi. And here we come to one of the most crazily exhilarating experiences I ever had in a cinema, Mad Max Fury Road. When I came out of this film in the cinema, it was, in my mind, a 10 out of 10. And I think maybe it was inevitable that watching it again at home was never going to be quite the same experience. But you know, that's what cinemas are for. That's why we make movies. That's part of why we make movies, for cinemas, for the big screen, for everything that that particular experience can bring. You know, it's great to have a movie to take home, to watch again and again, to continue to sort of explore it and get more out of it. Right now, it sits at a very high 9 out of 10 rather than a perfect 10. But how many movies even get to that level of achievement and satisfaction? Very few. And how many of them are, like, in theory, the fourth entry in a series, in an action film, you know, futuristic action film kind of series? How many series like the Mad Max series basically get better as they go on? I know that a lot of people have a lot of qualms about Beyond Thunderdome. I don't. I do think the Mad Max series got progressively better as it went on. And anyway, this isn't really a sequel. I think we can all accept that, you know, we shouldn't consider it a follow-on to the other three Mad Max movies. Just consider it a reimagining of the whole of the premise, and just like lay back and just soak up the crazed, like, high octane insanity and weirdness that George Miller throws into virtually every scene of this incredible film. I look forward to watching it again. Moana. Now, Moana is like Mad Max Fury Road. I went in at a cinema experience. Most of these films, I think virtually all of them, except for Ex Libris and another one that we'll come to shortly. The vast majority of these 10 I did manage to see in a cinema. I went into Moana thinking that, yeah, look, I try to see all the Disney animations that look like they could be pretty good. I try to see them on a big screen if I can. I didn't go in with massive expectations because I just thought, yeah, well, it's an original character. I don't know what to expect. You know, hopefully it'll be really good. It was just one of the most beautiful, brilliant, amazing, exhilarating, wonderful experiences I've ever had with a feature film in a cinema. It was a 10 out of 10 on that day, and it basically still is a 10 out of 10 for me. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It sits right near the top of the ladder. It's just got everything that I could possibly want for a movie. It's got a great story, great visuals, great voice work, stunning animation, beautiful songs, terrific humor, really thrilling and adventure, and really quite scary bad guys, if you want, you know, for want of a better term, towards the end. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film, and I was just, because it took me by surprise, I think that made it all the more wonderful for me. There was a risk that I might get a bit burned out on Moana when I accompanied my two young nieces and their family on a holiday in which Moana got watched a lot, and I sort of was present for a lot of that watching, and I worried that it might end up, you know, being a case of overkill with me. I think fortunately that hasn't happened yet, so, you know, again, cross my fingers that won't come to pass, and that I won't ever get sick of a movie as wonderful as Moana. The Revenant. Now, The Revenant is a film that I wonder, I guess it's the one that of these 10 that occasions the most doubt in me as to whether I'm just imagining how much I like it. It's been a little while since I've put it on, but I guess there are just so many ways that it stands out for me in my memory that I feel like there are just too many ways that I feel that it belongs on this list. And I just, couldn't come up really with a better candidate to replace it with. So here it is, The Revenant. Leonardo DiCaprio's, unforgettably intense performance in what was clearly an incredibly difficult shoot, with just an intensity of drama and violence and peril that movies rarely approach. Certainly movies, you know, to come out of the Hollywood system hardly ever approach. It's a tough one. It's a pretty grueling film, and it's not exactly what you call sort of upbeat entertainment, but it's a film I really love in so many ways for the degree of its intensity and its passion, and it's just a film that looms so large and so strong in my memory that I feel it really just has to be considered one of my top 10 of the decade. Now, this is another one that grew on me over multiple viewings, I must say. The Shape of Water. I love this film in a way that just most films just don't approach, because most movies don't have this kind of degree of imagination, fantastical imagination, combined with a true belief in romance of the old school, and to wrap it all up in a package that's like politically aware and politically committed and just beautifully designed, gorgeously scored, impeccably acted. It's just a concept that I really connected with, and the way that it was put together and pulled off by Guillermo del Toro and his team. I mean, for me, it's miles ahead pretty much of any other Guillermo del Toro film that I've seen. And the question of just how good this movie is or isn't has been somewhat controversial lately. And, I'm not even all that interested in engaging in that debate right now. All I will say is that this film has grown on me and grown ever larger in my heart the more that I've watched it. And I just had to put it in this top 10 list of my favourites of the decade. So that's The Shape of Water. Now we are at number 10, Sister. Now I imagine this is probably the one that you've least likely to have heard of. It's a realistic human drama. It's set in Switzerland, just outside of, inside and just outside of a skiing resort, inside I guess a Swiss skiing resort, where a young impoverished boy who has access to the resort by having purchased a pass. He's obtained a pass to get into the resort, and once he's in there, he decides, pretty easily, as you see in the film, to steal things from tourists that they just leave unattended, and to sell them on to people who want to buy second-hand snow jackets, goggles, skis. Mostly he knows just how to get the best, most valuable skis to sell on. But it turns out he's not just doing it for fun. He's doing it because his sister, whom he lives with, his older sister, is pretty close to useless in supporting the two of them. So as a young kid, all of the responsibility has been unfairly placed on him, and he's got to be the one responsible for bringing the money in. And it might sound like again, the kind of thing that, I'm not really interested in a feature film about poor people living on the margins of society and trying to scrabble together a living and the injustice of it all. It's so much more interesting than that premise might sound. And there are reasons for how interesting the movie is that I can't get into because that would be spoiling the experience. It's just a beautifully visual drama in the way that the director Ursula Mayer captures the mountain setting. It really, the way that she photographs it and photographs the characters around it and within it, really does contribute beautifully to the drama of this film. And it's just a really tragically engaging human story that I just think is so... It's hard to articulate in some ways as to what makes this film stand out from all the other kind of quality human dramas from this decade that I've seen. I guess all I feel like, would be useful for me to say is that this one stands out enough for me that it belongs in my top 10 of the decade. And it's a film that has grown and grown on me. As I said, the more I've watched it and the more I contemplated it, the more I want to watch it again. I watched it again recently, unlike a lot of these films, and it reinforced for me how strong and how remarkable a film I think it really is. So that's Sister. And that is the end of my top 10 movies of the decade. Thank you so much for getting this far all the way to the end and listening to me prattle on about these movies that I love so much. Hopefully you'll seek out some of them yourself if you haven't already. And Happy New Year!